Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching this from, and welcome back to our next panel discussion for the Investable Showcase 2021. So delighted to be joined today with by a panel of investors in the digital health and health tech space, titled "Can You Have Too Much of a Good Thing?" So we'll have an interesting debate and discussion around the influx of capital into the health tech space, and hear from some leading investors who have been investing in this space for a number of years. Please do keep your questions coming in through the chat and Q&A function on the right-hand side, which you'll see just to the right-hand side of the video where you're viewing this now. And we'll get to as many as we can throughout and at the end. So please do keep them coming throughout the panel discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our moderator for today's discussion, Tina Tan with First Word Healthtech. Tina, over to you.
Great, thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us in this session. I'm Tina Tan. I'm the executive editor of First Word Healthtech. We provide news and analysis on the digital health space. So as Josh said, this is all about digital health investment. If you had been listening to the earlier panels, it was broadly talking about the life sciences industry, but we are very much focused on digital health today in this session. And we've got a great group of panelists. All of them have been active in this space for a while. They'll be providing insights on how investments in this market has evolved, especially in the last year or so. Of course, I'm talking about this huge surge in capital that's been poured into digital health companies. So before they share those insights, I'll let them do a brief introduction of themselves. And also, I think what's important is that they define what digital health means to them. Digital health can mean different things to different people. So our panelists will briefly give an outline of what areas they're most interested in. So perhaps we can start off with Tanya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Dow. I'm the CEO of Debiopharm Innovation Fund. Really happy to be here today with this wonderful group of investors, and thanks, Tina, for having me on the panel. What does digital health mean to us? It is software solutions that are used to bring patients better care. So whether it is in a direct app for patient or whether it is a software that's used in order to develop better drugs, better treatments for patients, that's how we define digital health. And we invest in cancer journeys, digital application, digital health for cancer journeys, and also digital health in order to improve the way that pharmaceutical industry develops drugs.
Great. And of course, Tanya's fund is slightly different from the others in the sense that you're a strategic investor, aren't you? But
that's correct, yes.
We'll talk a little bit more about that as to how that might impact your investment strategy. So maybe we can move on to Janka next.
Yes, thank you, Tina. Pleasure to be here on this panel. So Janka Dittmar, head of health tech investment at Gilde Healthcare. So health tech for us means medtech, digital health, diagnostics, and life science tools. We've got a transatlantic fund with about 450 million right now in size that we're investing from, our fifth fund raised last year. I've personally been investing for 15 years in the digital health space, previously also with Philips. And what digital health means for me, besides being quite a fuzzy sort of theme, it's anything that delivers better care at lower cost to patients in a way where either the product itself is digital or some means of getting that product to patients has an important digital component in the value chain or the payment model. So it's quite a broad definition. And I think we're going to see digital health as a topic sort of go away, and eventually we'll talk about subsectors that in their own right will be bigger than current medical devices, and maybe even some as big as therapeutics. Who knows?
Great, thanks, Janka. Moving on to David.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tina. So David Germonpré, a partner at MTIP. MTIP is a pan-European health tech investor focusing on, let's say, later stage companies that already have some commercial traction. Health tech for us is a combination of digital health and connected medical devices. We basically start from the paradigm that there are a number of technologies that enable certain trends in the healthcare sector. So there is, 5G, artificial intelligence, big data, a number of technologies that really have boosted and made possible that some digital health trends are being realized as we speak. And those trends for us fundamentally are decentralization of care, bringing care from the hospital to the patient at home, can be diagnostics, therapeutics, or prevention. Also, personalized care, more tailor-made solutions for each patient. Then another thing is preventative care, very important, avoiding that with digital tools, patients develop certain chronic diseases. Then also very important, we want to focus on those trends in our portfolio, and sometimes one company can have 2 or 3 trends at the same time. So that's really what we focus on in investment rounds that vary initially between around 8 million up to 12, 13, 15 million per company.
Great, thanks, David. And last but not least, Christoph.
Yeah, hi. Thanks to Josh for having us on the panel, and thanks, Tina, for moderating. I'm Christoph, I'm a partner at Albion VC. We're a fairly well-established venture capital fund in the UK. It's been around for 25 years. And over the time, we've invested in almost 100 technology businesses. Healthcare is an area we've been investing in for almost 20 years now. And I guess digital health, we started actively investing 10, 11 years ago, one of the first ones in Europe to really proactively target, what at the time was called healthcare IT, and started out investing, in pharma sort of facing software, because at the time, sort of provider facing wasn't really that mature yet. And that's an area, which we call digital pharma, which we're still very active in. We've got decentralized clinical trial platforms, we've got ePro platforms, we've got sort of data analytics platforms, all focused on pharma, and that's an area that's grown quite considerably now, especially since COVID. And the other area we're focused on quite strongly is what we call digital care, which is really sort of the big sort of chronic disease burden, tackling those with a combination of software, sometimes hardware, and a sort of human layer. And really to sort of deliver a solution to healthcare systems and insurances or providers to bring more better outcomes at lower cost to the market, and also technologies which are just much more easy to use for the patient. And we tend to sort of invest at late seed and then all the way through to Series B. Trying to deploy between 10 to 50 million pounds or euros per company. And, in total, we've got roughly 700 million of evergreen money under management.
Great, thanks, Christoph. So as you can see, we had our panelists, they invest in a very broad range of digital health technologies and solutions. And I just wanted to give a quick reminder to the audience out there, especially the digital health companies that are listening in. This is a great opportunity for you to pick the brains of these 4 panelists. They're very prolific investors in the digital health space, as you can see. So if you have any questions at all, even if it doesn't follow on from our discussion points, do put it in through the chat box. This is a great time to put your questions to them and get some answers. So let's get into the discussion, which is all about this. Like I said, it's this huge glut of money that's going into digital health. I mean, we're not just seeing lots of money, but we're seeing each round getting bigger and bigger. And we have the numbers to prove it. There are quite a few organizations that track VC activity, including my organization. And the numbers might vary a bit, I'd say, but we're all within the same ballpark. At the end, just to set the scene a bit, at the end of Q3, I think we're all around sort of like the mid $20 billion mark in total venture dollars raised by digital health companies. And the tally we got at First Word at the end of October is just gone over 30 billion. So that's a lot of money. And as I said, the rounds are getting bigger. Christoph, you said, you and David, you guys invest in the seed and right up to the more early stage sort of phase. But what we're seeing is that these so-called seed rounds and early stage rounds, they're looking bigger and bigger. So the seed rounds look more like Series A, Series A's look like B rounds, et cetera, et cetera. Does this resonate with you all? And, first of all, why are these rounds getting so big? I understand that the pandemic, we all talk about the pandemic, putting digital health at the forefront, pushing demand, for such solutions. But, what other drivers are there that are sort of like making people want to just put their hands in their pockets and write out a check that seems to be getting bigger and bigger? Maybe since we ended with Christoph, we'll start off with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think first of all, that's not a trend which is unique to digital health tech. You're seeing this across, the whole technology or sort of software landscape. We've got, 75% of our funds get deployed as non-healthcare, digital health companies, and it's a trend that's probably even more pronounced, I'd argue, outside of healthcare. Healthcare is still lagging behind to a certain extent. I think that's the first point to say. The second point is that the large numbers are clearly driven by the US. So Europe is actually still quite small compared to the US and actually also Asia. And that that has a number of reasons why that is, but it's certainly the trend is certainly going up also in Europe. The reason for that is that there's more capital available, clearly. That's just a function of liquidity, and liquidity is just very high for a number of reasons. But it's also driven by more opportunity. And even pre-COVID, actually, we've seen more opportunity, more, I guess, entrepreneurs, more technology adoption. It's healthcare has lagged behind, but it was catching up pre-COVID. And now over the last year and a half since COVID hit, the first couple of months post-COVID was obviously everybody was like a bit like a deer in the headlights. So trying to reassess, and investment activity went down quite considerably, but then picked up very, very quickly afterwards. And obviously technology adoption has accelerated significantly with COVID because people had to adopt technology because of remote first, because of business as usual not being feasible anymore. And so that opportunity, that sort of adoption you're seeing in the end market is driving growth in companies, and therefore those companies, as they're growing or loss making, they consume and need more capital. So those would be that would be sort of a very high level summary, Tina, as to why we're seeing all that money pouring in.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know that Albion and MTPI have done joint sort of investment rounds. You've invested in Aviva together, and it's interesting you mentioned about how there are the big rounds are being driven by the US investors and also basically from international investors from Asia. Do you want to talk a bit about whether has that changed the way you look for other sort of investors to join in your syndicate, David?
Yes. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yes, obviously. I just want to follow on first on what Christoph said, is that there is indeed an inflow of money in the market. And I would say a lot of what we call non-traditional investors. So there are, of course, in Europe, the established European venture capital and growth equity firms that are already there. Some of them more recently, some of them already for many years. But there is this influx of money from corporate ventures that were maybe already investing in therapeutics or diagnostics, but not so much in digital health. So that's switching. They're also going into digital health. And then other non-traditional investors, like a lot of asset managers and and investors that previously didn't look too much to healthcare, but then thanks to or due to the pandemic, suddenly it got it got their attention, and they also want to reserve a pocket of their money into that in our vertical, right? And then switching back to the latest investment round of Oviva, it's my partner actually that's on the board of Oviva, not myself, but Oviva is a good example, to the extent that there was in the Series B round, the European syndicates like Albion was there, and MTIP led that Series B round. Early Bird joined as well, some others. But then in the Series C round, we got more international names. There was Temasek from Singapore that joined in that round, and also Sofina, which is a Belgian holding company that also normally does already larger tickets in certain companies. So it's another kind of non-traditional VCs that really also take up the larger tickets in larger investment rounds. And so where I don't think we can distinguish between Series A, B, C, because that really depends on the development of each company. But it's more the size of the rounds that we see it now possible in Europe to do digital health funding rounds for companies that already have some commercial traction, some millions of euros of revenues. And we can easily set up rounds of between 30 to almost 100 million is feasible in our space these days, which was not so easy only 1.5 or 2 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds very positive for digital health companies out there. I want to move on to Janke, because I know he's got a long experience in digital health investing, and also I'm interested to hear what he has to say about how the makeup of the syndicate, investor syndicate, has changed or evolved over time, and also the size of the funds that's made available to you as an investor.
Yeah, no, happy to comment on that. I mean, to start with, I'd like to sort of take a contrarian view here to the thesis of the panel. I don't think there is too much of a good thing in the venture domain. I think the more the merrier. And if you look at the industry overall, we're disrupting, just in the US, for example, a $4 trillion industry. Like if you look at the disruption of the advertising industry, which is a $100 billion industry by the big tech players generating 10 trillion of value, is small compared to the opportunity that digital health has in front of it. So I think we need a lot more capital, and Europe is certainly behind. And actually, in spite of growing, as Christoph said, falling further behind. So I did the analysis this morning, and actually we're falling from 15% last year to 12% of VC dollars in digital health this year, whereas in medtech we're at about 20 to 25%. So in digital health, we could argue we're underinvesting in Europe. In terms of what the situation is for investors, I say the more the merrier, but in the end, you have to look at quality. So entrepreneurs should look very carefully as to who they get married to on the cap table, in the board, who they're working with. And digital health is not a standard formula yet, right? There's some pretty important thinking strategically ongoing that has to happen for these companies to become viable. And having healthcare specialist investors is certainly valuable, and those haven't increased the numbers. The only thing that's happened is that they have gotten bigger funds, and they can do bigger rounds themselves, and sometimes are less inclined or less forced to syndicate, which makes it easier and faster to raise money, and makes it easier for European companies to compete with US companies which have more capital. But still, it may be beneficial to continue to build syndicates in preparation of future IPOs, bring in crossover investors, geographic kind of spread if you're moving to Asia, but also to the US, to basically represent the transatlantic nature of a venture, already on the board. For us, we are transatlantic by design, with 2 offices on both sides. So this is sort of built in. But we often like to have the company of experienced US investors as companies grow.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about now you have, I guess, the flexibility with more funds, whether or not to go ahead and form a syndicate for a round. I'm interested to hear on Tanya's side, because I know that you do look, even though you're a corporate fund, you do try and form syndicates, bring VCs on board in an investment round. Perhaps we can hear a little bit more about your strategy, Tanya. I mean, how has that evolved? I mean, because I take it that when you look at investment, you see it from a slightly different angle, because there is you're not just looking for a financial end goal return on investment, but you're looking potential collaboration, or maybe even bringing in the investment proposition, your portfolio company, into the fold of the biopharm. Maybe talk a little bit more about your strategy.
Sure. So we're typical Series A investor, starting from A and following on onwards from there. There's different, strategic VCs or CVCs have different strategies. Some are acquisition pipelines, some are investing in the ecosystem in order to keep their subcontractors kind of nourish that market. We're a sort of a learning strategic fund. So what it means that we're not planning to acquire these companies, but as a pharma company that we're facing huge changes in our market and the way that we need to do our work. We invest for 2 reasons: to build the industry together with these startups, because we want to be a part of building that future. And then the second reason, of course, is that while we're doing this, we will maybe learn faster about newer technologies. We can be more on the front line adopting these technologies, whether it is in silico clinical trials, utilization of real world data in clinical trials, and so on. Having said that, yeah, our fund has a financial goal. So our investment scope or the focus is defined by the strategy, and then we do financial investments. We always syndicate because we believe that we have to bring more knowledge around the table. Different perspectives. VCs have certain perspective. We have maybe very intimate knowledge of the customers, the customer need, the markets, and we can provide expertise in regulatory, market access, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, we bring, as a strategic investor, we bring added value to the table.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned how it's all about building this digital health ecosystem, trying to strengthen it, and bringing the enabling technologies that can bring about virtualization of healthcare. Making it a reality. But obviously, this is a business after all, and with so much money going in, more investors interested in digital health, I imagine there's a lot of competition for the good quality investment propositions. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, about the challenges. It's always good, as Janke said, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Janke. There's never too much, as much money, if we can have as much money in it as possible, to support the companies, that's great. But obviously there are, out of the companies that are coming through the pipeline, those that are really good investments, how good are they? I mean, are you talking about, are they few and far between? Is having all that money that attracting quite a lot of not very good quality digital health companies out there? They're just looking to, ride the wave that of interest. I don't know who wants to take that, Janke?
Yeah, I can comment a little bit. Look, I think in terms of our sort of hit rate in the funnel, it's always been about the same, somewhere between 1 and 200 companies that we need to look at to find one investment, and that hasn't changed that much. I think seeing the big development here in the market, you attract better entrepreneurs and they build better companies. So I think the offer is improving, increasing. I think more companies are becoming of age and they're finding their sweet spots in their business model. And then it becomes a question of a little bit of a different dynamic. So we went from a industry-driven digital health sector prior to the pandemic to a market-led, sort of unmet need-led sector post-pandemic. And now it becomes more of a land grab exercise. So which company that is raising more money to become the winner, because many of these games are winner takes it all games. But the quality is important, and what you will see is that some of the tourists in the sector will quickly go away when there is a setback and when there's a correction, which surely will come. And then these companies will be separated between those that are able to survive and those who are not. And let's not forget, the decision makers in healthcare haven't become more lenient. The payers are increasingly gaining in power, and they're very strict on what their criteria are for acceptance. Physicians don't waste their time on bad digital health tools, and the providers overall also need to see a return on investment. And increasingly, the patient comes into the equation. He also wants to, or she wants to, be engaged and have an experience that corresponds to what they want. So I think there's many hurdles for digital health companies, and if you invest in the wrong company, we'll find out very, very soon.
That's interesting. Also, I like that little word of caution you had in there, Janke, in terms of calling them tourists, I guess, like the non-traditional healthcare investors. I guess it's a word of caution to digital health companies looking for investors to make sure that they also get quality investors on board. David, did you want to add something to what Janke said?
Yeah, I mean, your initial question, first let me refer to what Janke said initially. I completely agree that we definitely are lagging to the US in terms of money being raised and funds being raised here in digital health in Europe. And just over the last year, in some companies that we have in our portfolio, some US competitors that are maybe 1 year ahead in terms of commercial development were able to get some unicorn valuations. So, I mean, that's something we have not seen so often yet in Europe. I think what we have seen over the last years is there were a lot of very early stage companies some years ago with ideation, some initial business plans. And now I see the absolute number of companies that already have some initial commercial traction, meaning in B2B SaaS business models and stuff like that, having ARR revenues of 1 to 5 million euros, or that is more common right now these days. But even there, of course, you have to try to pick the winners, right? And with that critical mass that is increasing, we also believe that there will be some leaders that are sufficiently funded that stand up and that can eventually become also leaders in the European market, because there will be a crash probably in terms of valuation on digital health going towards a hype cycle, but there will also be a consolidation in the market. So there will be some well-funded players that can acquire less funded players that have interesting pieces of technology that can really be fitted in the digital health platforms of the larger ones. So I think it's going to be key for us as investors to really contribute to that consolidation wave and help to build hopefully also a couple of unicorns, or maybe some tens of them ideally, to really mature the ecosystem further in Europe. And that's really something that we as MTIP want to contribute to.
Tina,
can I just?
Sorry, go ahead, Tanya.
Sorry, I just wanted to pick up. Sorry, Tanya. I'll let you. I just wanted to pick up the ecosystem that David mentioned there. I think it's very important to remember that this is not a zero-sum game. Okay, so more investment drives actually more funding for entrepreneurs and therefore sort of more opportunity to invest. So sort of a virtuous cycle, if you will. We have to sort of remember that one of the key risks of early stage businesses is actually financing risk. So having well-capitalized businesses is actually a good thing. I mean, we have lost, a couple of deals lately, primarily from sort of, to, I guess, non-healthcare, investors who, sort of general tech investors who, are investing just, typical sort of 3 times ARR growth type businesses. And, if you stumble across one of those in healthcare, which is still quite rare, then those are sort of the deals that, the sort of indexes and the Excels of this world also, vie for. And then those guys have very strong brands and it's difficult to compete, I think. But other than that, I don't think there's actually there's less of an opportunity. There's more of an opportunity because the wall of money actually, as I said, creates more opportunity. The other thing I'd like to sort of just point out is that as the tech boom, it's just creating this demand for talent. I mean, salaries, of software engineers and sort of other, talented stuff, it's just going through the roof. And so that means you need more capital as a company. And so therefore, again, having more capital available is actually is required to execute. And then the last thing I'd sort of say is that, we're seeing now, and this goes somewhat to the point that I think David made, about the sort of, evolution, and consolidation of the industry. I mean, a couple of years ago, you basically had a lot of sort of point solution providers, whereas now I think people are moving much more to, broad-based platforms, the healthcare providers, the healthcare systems, the health plans in the US, the pharma companies, they're all not looking for point solutions anymore. They're looking for, for broad platform, single, ideally single vendor sort of status. So, one company, one vendor, giving them a suite of offerings. And again, that requires more capital. So, you kind of need that, amount of capital. And it's a good thing that we have that much capital now going into the sector.
Yeah, I have 3 points that haven't been mentioned at all yet that I thought that are kind of part of this whole topic. First of all, you asked Tina, how have things changed on the market because there's so much capital available. First of all, I think the speed has really changed. We've done in the past couple of months 5 term sheets. 2 of the companies were acquired in the middle of the process. 3, the other 3 we're trying to close at record speed because we don't want to lose them. We also see other investors moving really fast, especially US investors coming into the process with hardly any due diligence, putting down a term sheet because they want to reserve a seat. So that's one, speed. The other thing is, why is there so much capital available? Why are these rounds bloated? I think part of the reason is also that, look at the fund sizes that the US investors, especially, and now also in Europe, the investors are raising. If you have $1 billion fund, you don't want to make 2 to 3 million investments. You want to make 20 to 30 million investments. A lot of private equity funds, private equity players have actually started funds recently that are more driving the deal flow towards the PE. So they're starting kind of VC funds under them that would drive the deal flow. Now, those VC funds are also getting a lot of money, and they're coming with, kind of to the Series A, B sector with the idea of, okay, we're going to find innovative companies and we're going to grow them up quickly for, to move, up the line. But they are also having this issue of they need to put bigger tickets in. They won't put 4 million, 5 million tickets in Series A. They need to put 50 million tickets in Series A. So there's that dynamic. And the third point that I wanted to bring up is when we're talking about the US market, how quickly the startup companies in the US are growing. Look at the healthcare the GDP, the percentage of GDP that's going to healthcare in the US is about 20%, whereas the rest of the world in developed countries like Europe, it's about 10%. Now think about the quality of care. Do you think that there's more problems in the US healthcare than European healthcare? We have our own set of problems, but when you think about that market opportunity of 10% of GDP must be inefficiency of care. Also, while not all the amount of people that are not even insured is huge. So I think that there's, if you take those three things, there's huge amount of money available. So you need to, quickly grab everything. And then on the other side, the US market opportunity is bigger than European market opportunity. European market is also more fragmented. So these are all playing into the dynamics in our field at the moment.
Yeah, definitely what you say, is aligned with like what Christoph has said in terms, and Janke and David, in terms of like, it does seem like being a digital health investor now is quite a hairy situation. You have a lot of competition, you have to be quick off the mark, and you have to try and convince digital, almost, it seems like the tables have turned. You have to try and convince digital health companies, to have you on board as opposed to just somebody who's just bringing in the money. And I
wanted to point out on that. I mean, we have been in some deals lately where the founders already had 5 term sheets on the table, or like they were just choosing term sheet shopping, if you may, between and like in their board, they could really assess every potential investor with the pros and cons, and go do reference calls on us, like to really, find out, can we speak with some of your CEOs that you have in your portfolio companies, to really get convinced to take us as an investor, because they really had the choice between many of them. So that is definitely something that is in some markets in Europe happening right now, because mainly a bit maybe for earlier stage deals than for later stage deals, but still, I mean, this has changed because a couple of years ago, the founders really had to try to attract VCs and convince the VC, where now in some deals, it's just completely the other way around. And so we have to prove our added value and really show how we add value to the companies and why they should choose us as an investor. Luckily, we've been able to do so, but that's definitely something that has changed.
But that's a good thing, isn't it, David? I mean, at the end of the day, you could argue we're dealing in the ultimate commodity, right? It's money, right? And so actually asking the question, where do you add value, is a very, very relevant one. And actually convincing entrepreneurs to take, you on board. I think Janke qualified it as sort of getting married, or I can't remember who it was, but that's the important, aspect of it. You're really entering into a partnership, long-term partnership here, and choosing your investors wisely is absolutely the right thing. So I'm quite pleased that we're having to demonstrate that it's not just the money we bring, but but value above and beyond that.
So just because I'm aware of the time constraints, let's just change our lens a little bit now and look beyond the investment. So the company you've invested in got this whole load of money now, and what I'm interested in knowing is, with so much capital available to these companies, are they deploying it? Are you seeing them deploying it the right way? I mean, the whole idea, I think what I've spoken to quite a lot of investors, what they look out for are, as I think Christoph touched on it, are platforms, a scalable business, that you can grow beyond. You don't want just like a one solution, a one trick pony. You want something that can just scale and grow over time. And the US, and touching on what Tanya said, there's so much opportunity on the US side. Maybe this is a good time to bring in a question from the audience about, how do your portfolio companies scale beyond the US focus? This is from Merit Baga. Anybody want to take that? How have you seen, perhaps this is an opportunity for you to look back on some of the companies you've invested in, some of the success stories, and how they have successfully scaled their business.
I can be contrarian.
Janke, do you want to go ahead?
I can be contrarian here. I find that digital health is a little bit provincial still, and there's a reason why. So until a couple of years ago, none of the big digital health companies in the US was even interested in Europe, let alone the rest of the world. And I think in Europe, we also have a problem that there's not that many opportunities for companies to become standalone companies because of the dysfunctional sort of public markets in comparison with the Nasdaq in the US. So in the end, European companies are somewhat destined more to being acquisition targets for US publicly listed companies. So I think that's something that I would want to change. And then each of these regions within Europe have their own payer structures. So you end up with quite a fragmented landscape that digital health is fighting more than medical device. So most of the time, either you have to first be public or be acquired before you can think about the rest of the world. So I think right now it's a land grab in the US and you need to be very focused to win. I feel though that leaves a lot of opportunity on the table, and there will be local heroes, whether it's in Africa or in Asia, that are cropping up that may even overtake some of these US players. So there's a big opportunity for entrepreneurs that we're not taking advantage of right now.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that, and I'd add that I mean, Europe is tough. You know, we've got, so we were talking about Oviva before. Your light's gone off, Tina, there. You know, they're one of the very few ones that actually have operations in a couple of European countries. There aren't many, and there's a reason for that. It's just very, very challenging to scale across European countries because, as Janke said, I mean, the healthcare systems, you know, the insurance, you know, basically in the back end, you know, the payment systems are very different in every country. And of course, you know, reimbursement payment is absolutely critical to any business model. And so, you know, there may be sort of a handful that have scaled across Europe, and Oviva is, you know, probably one of the most successful ones. What we see most companies actually do, certainly in the UK, is the first, you know, other sort of non-UK market they look to is the US, you know, naturally language reasons, and it's the, you know, biggest market. And we've got two companies in our portfolio which are basically right now doing that shift. And you know, what they basically have to do is move lock, stock, and barrel over to the US. So move the entire, you know, senior management team, headquarter, et cetera, over to the US, because it is just very, very difficult to scale, you know, geographically. And if you have got the UK and the US, you know, and you compare the relative sizes of those markets, it's very clear which market you want to focus on if you want to, you know, grow value.
On the other hand, what if I look at some of the data companies, for example, we've invested in BC Platforms, and there on that market, there's a wealth of companies with US data available, whether it's real world data, whatever, health data. There's not so many companies that can handle the Europe and Asia. So, and what is usually, typically, it is still easier for European company to expand to the US market than US company to expand to the European market. So if you can build a strong hold in European and Asian markets, of course, then, you know, you will be acquired by an American company or you will acquire an American company, but it's still something that maybe also we Europeans sometimes undervalue. It is a hard market in Europe, but if you can handle the European market, if you can capture that market, it's something unique. There's not a lot of direct competition for you.
True, and this brings back to what David has mentioned and Janke about consolidation that's happening within the digital health space, where the amount of capital that is coming into the market is supporting the lead players. And what we've seen at Buzzword, because we track a lot of M&A activity, is that it's not just the big players buying into other digital health companies and growing their platform and growing their geographic presence, but even smaller companies are also trying to buy in capabilities and functions. That's really interesting. Also, there was another interesting point that Christoph mentioned about the use of capital to buy in talent, because we are seeing a lot of people from the tech world, the big tech world, coming into healthcare. Do you think talent acquisition is a good way of deploying capital, Is that something as investors you always look at in terms of your portfolio companies? Would you recommend that is where your portfolio companies should really think about spending the money on?
I'll go first on this one. I think when we invest in a company, we always discuss with the management team where we can reinforce the management team and the organization as a whole. So where in the structure of the company we can attract additional talent, and that can be across different functions of the company. Obviously, the most common things are to develop further the software team, the engineer team on the one hand side, and on the other side the commercial sales and marketing team on the European level, and also if they are already having a US market go-to strategy, also in the US. We know that talent in the US is extremely expensive. I mean, especially for leadership positions, they come with very high asks, also on equity incentives. So there is always a little bit balancing of what we can provide, and you can sometimes even offer a very high salary for some people that don't really prove afterwards to be worth it. So there's that's definitely a lot of money that goes to talent acquisition, together then obviously with also product development, because it's not that because a company has already a scalable business model that you just want to scale that model further. You want to expand the solutions that they have into new products or additional adjacent products that can also be scaled further. So, but talent is definitely a very, very important capital deployment pocket. Yeah, absolutely.
Does anybody else want to add to David's comments before I bring in a question from the audience?
I would just say that it's getting also very competitive recruiting those top talents into the companies. And we see the US talents, there's a fast turnaround. It's almost like a revolving door, especially in BD and sales positions, even on the higher level. So this is a huge thing. And in the end, it's the team that turns that capital, those funds into growth. So it's really an important marriage of getting those talents on board so that you can grow the company. And that is, I think this is the one single biggest issue that every startup company, every Series A, Series B company struggles with, to recruit the top talent to the team and keep them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So before we come to our concluding remarks, I just wanted to bring in this pretty interesting question from Ashley Kenzel. It's regarding, who's driving basically the market, and we see in medtech and in pharma, it's all about trying to get reimbursement, drive to get adoption of your technologies. And the question from Ashley is, how do you think this will shift over time within digital health? The fact that payers are still driving much of the industry growth and the policy. And do your funds measure these sort of outcomes in addition to revenue when evaluating your investment propositions?
I think it really depends on the subsector you're talking about. If you have more of a product business, say we love the kind of digital health solutions that behave like a medical device or like a diagnostic or like a pill, like a digital therapeutic invested in big health. There it's all about who is paying and getting these decision makers to adopt what you have to offer. So I think reimbursement or payment, whether it's employers, self-insured employers, whether it's payers, whether it's CMS or whether it's out-of-pocket pay, make the difference. We see a shift to consumerization of healthcare all over the world. More co-pays, so more responsibility for your own health, and I think that's a good thing. There's more power moving to patient consumers, but the payers are still the most powerful resource. And then on the question of outcome tracking, we are tracking the impact that every one of our investments has, and that we have as a fund overall. We are tracking also environmental, social, governmental aspects, but most importantly is kind of how many lives did we touch in a positive way? How many lives did we save? We have a company that's already saved 30,000 people's lives. And that makes us really very proud and is energizing every day. Quality of life metrics like QALYs and daily. So that's something that we increasingly do, and now for every company.
David, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add maybe very briefly that also I agree with Janke that payers and pharma companies are still kind of driving the market. And what is important for us is that evidence-based scientific proof points in the technology, the digital health platform is really important. There are quite some players in the market that bank on well-being without any studies being conducted, whether it's randomized control trials or anything else. But we want to see some proof points that the solution really helps the patient and in the end also the entire healthcare system. And so in Europe, we don't have so many B2C business models yet. There are some emerging in the larger countries. But it requires, of course, in each country that you go, a large marketing budget to get renowned or known by the wider audience, whether it's through digital marketing on social media or even to TV ads, which are even more costly. So there are some, but it's still it's still in its infancy. And I think we also see more and more B2C models emerging in the coming years in Europe.
Great. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'll have to bring this session to a close. And before we do so, I had asked the panelists to come up with some concluding remarks, which brings us back again to the question, which was the topic of this session. Is it too much of a good thing? We already know Janke's answer, because he pretty much said under no doubt at all that you can never have too much. But perhaps we'll start with Tanya first. What do you think? Is it too much, just enough, or too little?
I think it's just right. Our industry is in the middle of maturation. It's maturing, and this will continue for escalating in my mind for some time. And I still think that we're just in the beginning of digital transformation of healthcare. And like Janke said, this will evolve. Later, we will not talk about digital healthcare, we'll talk about healthcare. And we're in the beginning of that journey. So bring it on. We need more money.
Right. Christoph, do you want to?
Yeah, I think we're scratching the surface. I mean, we're nowhere near where we really should be in healthcare. If people are interested, they should read our blog on our Albion VC website. We've got a long health tech primer, and there's a little chart in there which shows, sort of alluding to what Janke said earlier, the value of digital health sort of companies compared to the total healthcare spending, which is about, I think, single digit was 3-4%. If you compare that to advertising, Janke alluded to that, it's about 2 times the market value of Google and Facebook, the 2 big advertising behemoths combined, over the total spend in advertising, right? And financial services and retail is about sort of 50%. So we are absolutely scratching the surface and nowhere near digitized in healthcare, and there's so much more to go. And so therefore, I think there's a lot more capital that can go into the sector and deployed, if it's deployed cleverly. So we're pretty excited about where the industry is headed.
Mm-hmm. David, you said previously that you believe the valuation, these high valuations, the bubble's going to burst at some point, but at what point do you see that happening?
Well, I mean, what I expect earlier is an economic downturn globally. We have been, in the macroeconomic level through a very bullish period, and there will be at some moment in time in these in these 20s, let's say, a downturn. But even then, I think digital health will be proving very resilient. We have now seen during and post-pandemic the rise of some digital care delivery models. What I also absolutely believe that digital health will disrupt massively biopharma industry and biotech. That's really starting right now, but a lot of drug discovery companies and biotech companies are not leveraging enough yet on data, and that's starting, and so I'm very bullish. Maybe if there is a valuation bubble bursting in the US, it could trickle down to Europe as well. But still, the sector is going to thrive in the coming decade for sure.
Janke, I'll let you have the last word. Maybe I'll pose the question a little slightly differently. Is how do you see Europe? You mentioned it's still pretty much a laggard, to the US. Do you see halcyon days ahead, and Europe will somehow hike itself up to US levels?
Yeah, so when we started investing at Gilde in digital health 10 years ago, the biggest question was, where are the exit opportunities? Where the acquirers, what about public markets? And I think that positive developments you see in the US is that in the last few years, the IPO markets have opened up for digital health companies. They're well capitalized, and they in their own rights have become acquirers. So we are witnessing the creation of a new industry with its own sort of virtuous cycles and as an ecosystem. And I think there in Europe, we need to catch up. And I think the public markets need to play more important roles to create the European buyers of European champions of European health tech and digital health companies. So I think that would be really important for the years to come. And I'm also engaged with Invest Europe, for example, to try to make sure that we spend more as a percentage of GDP on innovation and venture capital. So I think this is really, really important. And ultimately, you need the consumer market. So people also need to be willing to invest in IPOs, to invest in public companies, and increasingly understand what they do for it to become a virtuous ecosystem in Europe, the same way that we are now witnessing in the US.
Great. So with that, just a couple of minutes till the next session. I think we're running it really tight. I'd like to thank the panelists for their fantastic insights today, and also thank you to you, the audience, for joining us. And back to you, Josh.
Let me reiterate the same thing. We have gone tight to time, but I think that's because we had a really in-depth and exciting discussion. And thanks for everyone for their inputs across the panel, and for Tina, as always, for guiding us through expertly through the session. Our focus on digital health and health tech continues. That the next session is our masterclass on planning and implementing successful digital health projects. We have Junaid Bajwa, Chief Medical Scientist with Microsoft Research, and two partners with Covington who are going to be taking us through that session. That one is one of the interactive masterclass workshops, so please do join on the main agenda and click through to join that Zoom meeting, which is starting in 2 minutes. But thank you again for all joining us today. Thank you to all of our speakers and to Tina as our moderator, and see you at 1 o'clock GMT for the masterclass.